Dear student, Assalamu alaikum. In institutional economics, today we are going to explore corruption. Learning outcomes. After this lecture, you will be able to understand what is corruption, economics of corruption, CPI, that is the Corruption Perception Index, history, and corruption and economic growth. So let's define what is corruption. Corruption is a form of dishonesty or criminal offense undertaken by a person or organization entrusted with a position of authority to acquire illicit benefit or abuse power for one's private gain. Simply, we can say that dishonest or fraudulent conduct by those in power, typically involving bribery. Economics of corruption. Economics of corruption deals with the misuse of public power for private benefit and its economic impact on society. Economies that are affected by a high level of corruption are not capable of pursuing as fully as those with a low level of corruption. Also, economies that are corrupted are not able to function properly since the natural laws of the economy cannot function freely. As consequence, corruption, for instance, leads to an inefficient allocation of resources, poor education and healthcare, or the presence of shadow economy. So what is the shadow economy? A kind of economy that includes illegal activities as well as unreported income from the production of the legal goods and services for which taxes should be paid but are not. So how to measure the corruption? The International Country Risk Guide ICRG make an index to measure the corruption. The Corruption Perception Index CPI is a detailed survey incorporating the data from many nations and groups. Also, the World Bank produces an annual control of corruption index that uses the similar sources to the International Country Risk Guide and Corruption Perception Index. So, history of the discipline of the economics of corruption. In 1969, the Nobel laureate economist Gunnar Myrdal found corruption almost a taboo amongst the economists as a research topic. Indeed, it has mostly been a matter of the political science and sociology. However, the scenario changed since 1970, since the Rose Ackerman article, The Economics of Corruption, published in the Journal of the Public Economics in 1975. More than 3,000 articles have been written with the corruption in the title, at least 500 of which directly focus on the different aspects relating to the corruption using an economic framework. Some books have also been published on the subject. So let's briefly discuss the Corruption Perception Index, that is the CPI, the data of the corruption. The Corruption Perception Index is an index published annually by the Transparency International since 1995, which ranks countries by their perceived level of the public sector corruption as determined by the expert assessment and opinion surveys. The CPI generally defines the corruption as the misuse of the public power for private benefit. The 2019 CPI, published in January of 2020, currently ranks 180 countries on a scale from 100, very clean, to zero very high corrupt countries. Denmark, New Zealand, and Finland are perceived as the least corrupt nation in the world, ranking consistently high among the international financial transparency, while the most perceived corrupt country in the world is Somalia, scoring 8 to 10 about, about of 100 since 2012. South Sudan is also perceived as one of the most corrupted countries in the world due to the constant social and economic crisis, ranking an average score of 13 out of 100 in 2018. So, according to the Corruption Perception Index, these are the top most corrupt countries. Number one, Somalia, CPI score 9, South Sudan, CPI score 12, Syria, Afghanistan, Yemen, Sudan, Libya, North Korea 17, Venezuela 18, and Iraq 18 as well. So let's discuss the corruption and economic growth. So corruption breeds inefficiencies that may affect the static level of the output. In order for the corruption to affect the economic growth as a whole, it must affect the population growth, capital accumulation, or the total factor productivity. A 1995 study of the Polio Moro shows the capital accumulation in the form of the investment is negatively correlated with the corruption, particularly foreign direct investment, due to the fact that the technological advances are primarily driven by the investment. This correlation also reveals that the corruption can negatively affect total factor productivity. Corruption and economic growth of GDP, some empirical evidence. According to the Park Hang Mao, political instability is the most important channel through which the corruption affects the economic growth. This study shows that 1% increase in the corruption level means that the growth rate is reduced about 0.72%. In other words, a 1 unit increase in the corruption index reduces the growth rate by 0.545 percentage points. Furthermore, the income inequality harms the economy on the country. According to the new OECD analysis, reducing some inequality. The new OECD analysis reducing income inequality would boost economic growth. For instance, Mexico's rising inequality knocked off more than 10 percentage points of growth over the past 2 decades, up to the Great Depression. Besides, there are countries like Spain, France, and Ireland where the greater equality helped increase GDP per capita before the crisis. The OECD study also finds the evidence that main mechanism through which inequality affects the growth is by un undermining education opportunities for children from the families with a poor socioeconomic status, which measures person's work experience and also person's or family economic and social position to others, which lower the social mobility. Here your assignment, write the summary of the following paper. The paper title is the economics of corruption, published in the Journal of the Public Economics, and the writer is the Rose Ackerman in 75. Here is the downloading link of the above paper.